Let me ask you something today. How long are you going to stay silent about what God already approved? How long are you going to accept less when the creator of the universe placed dignity in your breath, strength in your spine, and purpose in your existence? You were not created to be invisible. You were not designed to be stepped over, and you were not born just to survive. You were born to stand, to speak, and to fight. I didn't come here to tell you to fight people. I came to tell you to fight fear, fight oppression, fight the lie that says this is all life will ever give you. Because the same God who shaped mountains also shaped you. And if God thought you were worth creating, then your rights are worth defending. Today, I'm not asking you to be angry. I'm asking you to be awake. Because when a person wakes up to who they are in God's design, silence becomes impossible. So if you've been pushed back, talked down, ignored, or denied, this message is for you today. We talk about one thing, and one thing only: fight for your own rights. Let me take you deeper into this truth, because this is where everything begins. Before the world ever learned your name, before society placed labels on you, before anyone decided what you could or could not be, God had already given you dignity. That dignity was not earned. It was not voted on. It was not dependent on your background, your gender, your income, your mistakes, or your success. It was placed inside you the moment you were created. And that means no system, no person, and no circumstance has the authority to take it away. Yet look around us. Every day, people are made to feel small. A worker is underpaid but told to be grateful. A student is ignored because they don't fit the standard. A woman is silenced for speaking truth. A man is told to suppress pain and accept injustice as strength. Slowly, subtly, the world trains us to ask permission for respect, as if dignity is something we must borrow from others. But dignity does not come from people. It comes from God. Think about it. The same God who ordered the oceans where to stop also ordered your life to have value. The same God who placed precision in the stars placed purpose in your existence. If God did not ask the world whether the sun should rise, why should you ask the world whether you deserve fairness? Why should you wait for approval to stand tall when your very breath is proof that you matter? Many people live beneath their dignity, not because they are weak, because they have forgotten who gave them worth. They stay quiet in rooms where they are disrespected. They accept treatment that drains their soul. They normalize injustice and call it destiny. But hear this clearly: God did not create you to beg for what He already assigned. Look at daily life. A young employee watches others get credit for their work and says nothing because they fear losing their job. A person endures emotional disrespect in relationships because they believe love means endurance of pain. Someone stays in silence when their rights are violated because they were taught this is just how life is. But just because something is common does not mean it is correct. Just because something has been happening for a long time does not mean God approves of it. There is a difference between patience and permission. Patience trusts God's timing. Permission allows injustice to continue. And when you confuse the two, you slowly give away pieces of yourself. You don't lose dignity all at once. You lose it in small moments of silence and swallowed words and lowered eyes, until one day you wake up and don't recognize the strong person God created you to be. But today is a reminder that dignity is not arrogance. Standing up for yourself is not rebellion. Asking for fairness is not disrespect. It is alignment with God's design, because God does not create worthless lives. He does not create disposable people. He does not breathe purpose into something He plans to ignore. When you begin to understand this, something changes inside you. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop believing the lie that suffering is your permanent address. You start speaking with calm confidence, not anger, because you know where your worth comes from. You no longer fight to prove yourself. You fight to protect what God already placed in you. And here's the powerful part. When you recognize your dignity, you don't just change your own life. You shift environments. People treat you differently when you carry yourself with God-given self-respect. Boundaries become clear. Decisions become firm. Fear loses its grip, not because the world suddenly becomes fair, but because you stop agreeing with unfairness. This is not about pride. This is about truth. Truth says, I am created with value, therefore I deserve justice. Truth says, I will not be silent when my humanity is ignored. Truth says, I can be respectful without being oppressed. And when you stand in that truth, you honor God not with words, but with the way you live. So today, don't ask the world for permission to matter. Don't wait for validation to stand up. Don't let anyone convince you that dignity is something you must earn. God already gave it to you. Your responsibility now is to recognize it, protect it, and live like it is real, because it is. And when you do, fighting for your rights will no longer feel like a battle. It will feel like coming home to who you were always meant to be. Let me speak to a truth that many people feel but few dare to name, because this is where control often begins. Silence is rarely neutral. Most of the time, it is taught. It is trained into people slowly, quietly, until they believe it is their own choice. When someone wants to limit your freedom, they don't always start by locking doors. They start by making you doubt your voice. They convince you that speaking up is dangerous, disrespectful, or pointless. And once your voice is gone, everything else becomes easy to take. Look at daily life. In a workplace, a person notices unfair treatment but keeps quiet because they've seen what happens to troublemakers. In a classroom, a student knows the answer but stays silent because they've been laughed at before. In families, someone endures emotional harm because they were told, don't talk about private matters. Silence becomes a survival strategy, but over time, survival turns into surrender. And the most painful part, silence is often mistaken for peace. But peace that is built on fear is not peace. It is pressure. It sits heavy on your chest. It shows up as anxiety, exhaustion, and a constant feeling of being unseen. You smile on the outside, but inside, your voice is screaming to be heard. God did not design the human voice just to fill air. The voice carries truth. It carries boundaries. It carries justice. When God gave you a voice, it wasn't only to speak kindly, it was also to speak clearly. To say, this is not right. To say, this hurts. To say, I deserve better. When that voice is suppressed, something essential is taken from you. Silence is powerful, but not always in a good way. It protects those who benefit from injustice. It allows harmful behavior to continue without resistance. It convinces the oppressed that they are alone, that no one will listen, that speaking up will only make things worse. But history, life, and lived experience tell us something different. Nothing changes until someone speaks. Think about how many dreams were delayed because someone stayed quiet. How many rights were denied because people were told, this is just how things are. How many talented individuals never reached their potential because they learned early that their voice didn't matter. Silence does not mean agreement, but it often looks like it, and that misunderstanding costs people their freedom. Breaking silence doesn't mean shouting. It doesn't mean disrespect. It means refusing to disappear. It means choosing courage over comfort. Sometimes it's as simple as asking a question others are afraid to ask. Sometimes it's saying no for the first time. Sometimes it's telling your story even when your hands are shaking. Every time you speak, you reclaim a piece of yourself that silence tried to steal. And yes, speaking up can be uncomfortable. It can be risky. It can make people uneasy. Silence has a cost too, and that cost is paid with your confidence, your peace, and your sense of worth. Over time, unspoken words become heavy. They turn into regret. They turn into self-blame. They turn into the painful question, what if I had spoken? God did not place a voice in you so that fear could silence it. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that your truth matters more than your fear. When you speak, you remind yourself who you are. You remind the world that you are not invisible, and you remind others watching quietly that they are not alone. One voice may seem small, but it is never insignificant. A single voice can start a conversation. A conversation can start a movement, and a movement can change lives. When you speak, you don't just fight for your own rights, you light a path for others who are still trapped in silence. So let today be the day you stop swallowing your truth. Let today be the day you stop shrinking your voice to fit into spaces that were never meant to silence you. Speak with wisdom. Speak with respect. but above all speak. Because the moment you reclaim your voice, the first weapon of oppression loses its power and your freedom begins to rise. There is a quiet misunderstanding that has trapped countless people, and it sounds spiritual on the surface, but slowly steals their strength. It is the belief that staying afraid, staying silent, and staying small is a sign of humility. But fear is not humility. Fear is a cage, and cages, no matter how comfortable they look, are still prisons. Humility does not mean denying your worth. It does not mean accepting mistreatment. It does not mean allowing others to walk over you while you call it patience. True humility is knowing that you are created by God, accountable to God, and guided by God, not controlled by fear of people. When fear disguises itself as humility, it convinces you that standing up for yourself is wrong, that confidence is arrogance, and that courage is rebellion. Slowly, it teaches you to disappear. Look at everyday life. A capable person stays in a role far below their ability because they don't want to appear too ambitious. Someone with ideas keeps them locked inside because they fear being judged. A person endures disrespect in relationships because they were taught that endurance equals goodness. They tell themselves, this is humility. But deep down, they feel trapped. That feeling is not peace. It is fear wearing a religious mask. Fear builds invisible walls. No one else sees them, but you feel them every day. You want to speak, but something tightens your throat. You want to step forward, but doubt pulls you back. You want to claim what is rightfully yours, but you worry about being misunderstood. Over time, fear convinces you that the safest life is a small one, but God never designed you to live safely at the cost of your purpose. Think about how often fear makes decisions for people. Fear chooses silence over truth. Fear chooses comfort over growth. Fear chooses approval over integrity. And the longer fear stays in control, the more it shrinks your world. Dreams become unrealistic. Boundaries feel selfish. Confidence feels dangerous. You start asking permission for things God already placed inside you. Humility does not say, I am nothing. Humility says, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it. Fear, on the other hand, constantly seeks protection. It hides behind excuses. It avoids risk. It settles for less and calls it contentment. But contentment that comes from fear is not contentment. It is resignation. Every day, fear asks you to compromise a little more. Don't say anything. Don't try again. Don't push back. Don't stand out. And each time you listen, the cage grows stronger. Not because fear has power, because it has permission. Fear only rules where it is allowed to stay. Breaking out of that cage does not require becoming loud or aggressive. It requires becoming honest. Honest about what hurts. Honest about what you deserve. Honest about the voice inside you that keeps saying, there is more than this. Courage begins the moment you stop pretending fear is wisdom. Daily courage looks simple, but it is powerful. It looks like expressing a boundary without apology. It looks like applying for the opportunity you think you're not ready for. It looks like disagreeing respectfully instead of staying silent. It looks like walking away from spaces that diminish you, even when staying would be easier. God did not give you fear as a guide. Fear is a signal, not a leader. It tells you where growth is required, where faith must rise, and where courage must step in. When you allow fear to control you, you hand over the keys to your future. But when you face it, even with shaking hands, you reclaim your freedom. You don't need to become someone else to break free. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stop confusing fear with humility. Because humility bows to God, not to injustice. Humility listens, but it also stands. Humility is calm, but it is not silent in the face of wrong. The moment you step out of fear, your world expands. Your voice becomes steady, your choices become clear, and your life begins to reflect the truth that was always there. You were never meant to live behind bars. Fear may whisper that staying small is safer, but your soul knows the truth. Freedom begins when you stop calling the cage humility and start walking toward the life God designed you to live. There is a dangerous lie that quietly settles into people's hearts during hard seasons, and it sounds like this. If life is this difficult, God must be far away. Pain has a way of making people question their worth, their direction, and even their connection with God. When doors don't open, when prayers feel unanswered, when effort doesn't bring immediate reward, many assume absence. But struggle is not proof that God has left. Very often, Struggle is proof that something important is being shaped. Look at daily life. A person works honestly, yet success comes slowly. A student studies tirelessly, yet fails an exam. A family does everything right, yet faces loss. In those moments, people don't usually lose faith because they are weak. They lose faith because they were taught that ease equals approval and difficulty equals rejection. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does God. Growth has always required pressure. Nothing strong is formed in comfort alone. Muscles tear before they grow. Seeds break before they rise. Gold is refined by fire, not by praise. Struggle is not a sign of abandonment. It is often the environment where strength is developed. When God allows pressure, it is not to crush you, it is to prepare you. Think about how many times struggle redirected you. A rejection pushed you toward a better path. A failure humbled you enough to learn. A delay protected you from something you weren't ready for. At the time, it felt unfair. It felt painful. It felt lonely. But looking back, you can often see that the struggle carried wisdom you couldn't have received any other way. The problem is that struggle is loud. It demands attention. It makes emotions heavy. It makes people impatient. And in that noise, it's easy to miss the quiet work God is doing beneath the surface. Just because you don't see immediate results doesn't mean nothing is happening. Roots grow underground long before fruit appears above ground. Many people quit too early because they mistake resistance for rejection. They stop believing because the road got rough. They stop trying because effort didn't bring instant reward. But resistance often means you are moving forward, not backward. Opposition does not show up where nothing matters. Pressure does not come where nothing is changing. Daily life proves this again and again. A person trying to break generational cycles will face resistance. Someone choosing integrity over shortcuts will feel delayed. Someone standing for their rights will face pushback. These struggles are not signs that God is distant. They are signs that you are stepping into something meaningful. Struggle also reveals what comfort hides. It exposes fear, insecurity, impatience, and doubt. But not to shame you. It exposes them so they can be healed. Easy seasons rarely build character. Hard seasons do. They teach resilience. They teach discernment. They teach reliance on God instead of outcomes. When everything is going well, people often move on autopilot, but struggle forces reflection. It makes you ask deeper questions. It pushes you to grow inwardly before you grow outwardly. That inner growth is what sustains success when it finally arrives. There is also something powerful about how struggle connects people to their humanity. It softens arrogance. It builds empathy. It teaches compassion. People who have struggled tend to understand pain better, listen more deeply, and lead with wisdom rather than ego. Struggle shapes not just what you do, but who you become. God's absence is not measured by comfort. It is measured by purpose. And purpose often unfolds in places that feel uncomfortable. If God were absent every time life became difficult, no one would grow, no one would rise, and no one would transform. You are not forgotten because you are struggling. You are not ignored because things are hard. You are not unworthy because the road is long. Sometimes the delay is not denial, it is development. Sometimes the waiting is not punishment, it is preparation. Struggle asks an important question. Will you trust God's process even when you don't understand it? Will you keep moving even when progress feels slow? Will you believe that this season is shaping you, not breaking you? Every strong person you admire has a story of struggle behind them. Every voice that speaks with authority was once unsure. Every life that inspires others has passed through pressure. Struggle is not the opposite of blessing. It is often the pathway to it. So if life feels heavy right now, don't assume God is distant. Instead, ask what is being built within you. Ask what strength is being formed. Ask what wisdom is being gained. Because when this season passes, and it will, you will not be the same person who entered it. You will be stronger, clearer, more grounded. And you will realize that God was never absent. He was present in the pressure, shaping you for what comes next. There is a deep truth many people overlook. The way you treat yourself speaks louder than the words you say about God. Self-respect is not selfishness. It is not arrogance. It is not rebellion. Self-respect is a form of worship because it honors the life, breath, and value God placed inside you. When you protect your dignity, you are not lifting yourself above others. You are aligning yourself with the purpose for which you were created. Look at daily life. People often tolerate what slowly destroys them. They stay in environments that drain their spirit. They allow disrespect in the name of patience. They ignore exhaustion and call it dedication. Over time, they lose joy, clarity, and peace, and then they wonder why life feels heavy. The truth is, when you dishonor yourself, you slowly dishonor the gift God gave you, your life. God did not create you to be used, abused, or constantly diminished. He did not give you a voice just so it could be ignored. He did not give you emotions just so they could be dismissed. When you set boundaries, when you say no to what harms you, when you walk away from what steals your peace, you are not being difficult. You are being faithful to your own worth. Many people believe endurance equals goodness. They think suffering silently makes them strong or spiritual. But there is a difference between sacrifice and self-destruction. Sacrifice has purpose. Self-destruction has none. God does not ask you to disappear to prove devotion. He asks you to live fully, honestly, and with integrity. Self-respect shows up in simple, everyday choices. It looks like speaking up when you are treated unfairly at work instead of convincing yourself you deserve it. It looks like leaving a relationship that consistently breaks your spirit even when love is present. It looks like resting when your body is tired rather than glorifying burnout. These choices may feel uncomfortable at first, but discomfort is often the price of growth. When you respect yourself, you send a message to yourself and to the world. You say, my life matters. You say, my boundaries are real. You say, I will not trade my peace for acceptance. People may resist at first. Some will be offended. Others will test your limits. But over time, clarity replaces chaos. Respect invites order into your life. Self-respect also reshapes how you speak to yourself. Many people are harsh, critical, and unforgiving toward themselves in ways they would never be toward others. They replay mistakes endlessly. They define themselves by failures. They speak words over their own lives that they would never allow anyone else to say. But if God is patient with you, why aren't you patient with yourself? If God offers grace, why do you withhold it from your own heart? Honoring yourself does not mean pretending you are perfect. It means acknowledging your flaws without hating yourself for them. It means learning, growing, and moving forward instead of staying trapped in shame. Shame keeps people stuck. Self-respect sets them free. When you live without self-respect, you attract environments that mirror that lack. People take advantage, opportunities shrink, joy fades. But when you begin to honor yourself, your life begins to change, not magically, but intentionally. You choose better, you expect better, and gradually better meets you. There is also something powerful about how self-respect inspires others. When you stand firmly in your worth, you give permission to others to do the same. Your boundaries become a lesson. Your courage becomes a signal. Your refusal to accept less becomes a quiet invitation for others to rise. God is honored when His creation lives in truth. When you value yourself, you value the one who made you. When you protect your peace, you protect what God entrusted to you. When you refuse to live beneath your dignity, you declare that God's work in you is not cheap or disposable. Self-respect does not make you unkind. It makes you clear. It does not make you distant. It makes you grounded. It does not make you proud. It makes you whole. So stop apologizing for having boundaries. Stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself. Stop believing that suffering in silence makes you holy. Holiness begins with honesty. And honesty says, I will treat my life as sacred because God does. When you begin to live this way, something shifts. You walk differently. You speak differently. You decide differently, not because you think you are better than others, but because you finally understand that your life is a trust from God. And honoring that trust is one of the highest forms of worship there is. There is a moment that comes when standing up for yourself stops being only about you. It's the moment you realize that your courage is being watched quietly, closely, by people who don't have the strength yet, by people who are still afraid, by people who are waiting for proof that it's possible to rise. When you choose to stand, you do more than protect your own rights. You create a doorway for others to walk through. In daily life, people are always observing, even when they say nothing. A younger sibling watches how you handle disrespect. A coworker notices when you speak up in a meeting instead of staying silent. A friend sees you walk away from something harmful rather than settling out of fear. You may think these moments are small, but to someone else, they are confirmation that courage is allowed. Most people don't stay silent because they agree with injustice. They stay silent because they feel alone. They believe they are the only ones who feel uncomfortable, the only ones who feel mistreated, the only ones who feel unseen. But the moment one person stands, that loneliness breaks. Suddenly, others realize it's not just me, and that realization is powerful. History, families, workplaces, and communities change this way, not all at once, but through individual acts of bravery. One person refuses to accept unfair treatment. Another decides to speak honestly. Another sets a boundary where none existed before. These choices may look personal, but their impact spreads outward. Courage multiplies when it's witnessed. Think about how many times you were strengthened by seeing someone else stand firm. Maybe it was a teacher who defended a student, a worker who demanded fair pay, a woman who refused to be silenced, a man who chose integrity over comfort. Their actions didn't just change their own lives. They changed what felt possible for everyone around them. When you stand up for yourself, you challenge unhealthy norms. You disrupt patterns that rely on silence. You expose behaviors that thrive in the dark. This can make people uncomfortable, especially those who benefit from the old way. But discomfort is often the first sign of growth. Systems don't change because they are asked politely. They change because someone refuses to comply with what is wrong. Your stand doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It can be calm, firm, and respectful. It can be as simple as saying, "I'm not okay with this," or "this needs to change," or "I deserve fairness." These words, spoken with conviction, carry weight. They linger in rooms long after you leave. And here's the part many people forget. When you stand for yourself, you don't just empower others, you heal yourself. You break cycles of silence. You rewrite internal narratives. You stop teaching your own heart that it must endure everything quietly. That internal shift is just as important as the external impact. People who watch you may never thank you. They may never tell you that your courage helped them speak up later, but your example plants seeds, and seeds grow in their own time. One day, someone else will stand where you once stood, and they will do it with more confidence, because you showed them it was possible. God works through courage in ordinary people, through perfection, but through obedience to truth. When you stand in truth, you align yourself with justice, dignity, and purpose. You become part of something larger than yourself, a chain of courage that stretches further than you can see. This is how change begins. Not with crowds, but with individuals. Not with noise, but with resolve. Not with force, but with faith in what is right. Your decision to stand becomes a signal, a quiet but powerful message that says, we don't have to live like this anymore. So don't underestimate your role. Don't minimize your impact. Don't believe the lie that your voice doesn't matter. When you stand up for your rights, you make space for others to rise. You make room for truth. You make room for justice. And long after the moment has passed, long after the fear has faded, what remains is the ripple of your courage, moving through lives you may never meet, changing futures you may never see. That is the power of standing, not just for yourself, but for everyone who is still learning how.